Today, I decided to speedrun Super Mario Bros. Underwater, and first of all, let me explain the setup. So I had a Nintendo Switch surrounded by a waterproof bag, and for that, we also tried to vacuum seal it as much as possible to make sure there was no air. Even though they're called waterproof bags, they're not exactly perfect, and I really didn't want to break my Switch. Then, of course, I simply had a snorkel on with a GoPro attached to it, that way you could actually see the gameplay. Though it is a little bit hard to see because of the waterproof bag, but don't worry, that's pretty much what I was able to see as well. Not only did I have to deal with playing this underwater, but I basically had barely any vision, which is why I also decided to use the Nintendo Switch's screen record function to get you the gameplay on the top. But that has its problems as well. When you're screen recording with a Switch, you can only record up to 30 seconds of gameplay. So what I had to do was make sure I pressed the button at least every 30 seconds, otherwise you wouldn't be able to see everything. But even doing that perfectly, there's still a few frames every once in a while that are going to get dropped. And that's why every time we lose a little bit of gameplay, I'm going to put the word cut in the top left corner. Sometimes it's obvious, sometimes it isn't, so that'll just help with that. Obviously, no matter what happens though, you will still have the GoPro footage, so you'll know that it's all one run. Anyways, one last thing I wanted to talk about before we get to the difficult part of this run is definitely don't try this at home. First of all, my Switch got really close to breaking a few times, even with the waterproof bag. And secondly, you never really know what's going to happen when you combine electronics with water, so there's also the safety issue. I actually had 2 medical professionals on site the entire time we were attempting this speedrun, and yeah, luckily I didn't die. And speaking of dying, it's time to get to the levels where I did more than my fair share of that. See, I was actually attempting this speedrun for about 3 hours, which you can guess my entire body was wrinkly by the end. But I was a man on a mission, and I was not going to let this speedrun break me, no matter what happens. There was also the factor that I really didn't want to come back the next day and torture myself again, so I was determined to finish today. And you'll see that determination in how I did my fast forward too. The reason I picked up the mushroom earlier was so that I could do the easier version of fast forward 2, and also pick up a fire flower, which we'll be using for later. But after that, I decided to play this fairly safe because I really didn't want to lose this run, and make my way over to the pipe. If you don't know, with fast forward 2, we want to move our screen backwards so that when we enter the pipes exit zone, it actually uses the vine one, which will take us to the warp pipes and get us to world 8, which might be a little confusing, so I'll also leave a YouTube video in my description if you want to learn more about it. But at the end of the day, it's basically just a wrong warp. Now we're on to the final 4 levels in world 8, which are by far the hardest. For my speedrun, I wanted to get no deaths at all, so that meant if I made a single mistake, I would probably lose the run, especially since we want to keep the fire flower for safety, as it will be extremely helpful at the end of the run. So it was time to play this game really safe while still trying to go fast, which is why we're definitely going to pick up this star, because that allows us to do both of those at the exact same time, as well as give us a really good spot to save the video. We're getting to the point where these levels are going to be much longer than 30 seconds, so we have to do mid-level saves in order to not lose any of the video, which just means I need to slow down every once in a while so I can actually save. Oh, I should also probably bring up how I'm jumping through the piranha plants. You've probably seen in a couple levels, it looks like I should have hit the piranha plants, but I didn't actually. And that's pretty simple, it's just that the hitboxes don't actually match their models. And if you don't believe me, just go boot up your own game and try it out yourself. Some similar things happen with a few different enemies in this game, it's just how the game works. But now we're on to 8-2, which I think is probably the scariest level in the entire speedrun for me. There are so many different enemies and things that can hit you, and again, I really want to keep my fire flower, so we're gonna have to make sure we dodge every single one of those. This is also where my nerves started to come into play. Like I said before, at this time, I've been doing these speedruns for almost 3 hours, and you get really scared once you get later in the game because you really want this speedrun to be the one. And that's why I decided to use a lot more safety strats for this part of the game, using my fireballs to kill enemies, not going as fast, just making sure we can make it out of 8-2 so we can continue on, especially with these stairs. When you're playing this game out of water, stairs are not a problem at all, but I feel like the buttons are actually harder to press when you are in water, so yeah, just a good idea to play them slow. But okay, here's where I forgot to record the screen for 4 seconds, so here's some immersion for what I was hearing the entire time. Luckily, that was the only time I lost any of my gameplay, but I think you can still see it on the Switch, even if it's a bit harder. Just kind of a little mistake by me. I am happy I got to include the snorkel sounds though, because I actually think they're pretty soothing. I don't know, I might just be weird. But this level is obviously the Hammer Bro level, which is complete RNG. When you're doing a speedrun, you can go about this two ways. If you're not an expert player, you just have to hope they won't hit you and take the most optimal pass by jumping above them. And if you are an expert, you'll actually know the patterns they're going to do based on what frame they're on. But obviously, I wasn't really in either of these paths because I really didn't want to reset and I didn't want to trust my luck. So instead, we can use Fire Mario. This is why we wanted to keep Fire Mario for as long as we did, so we can play this as safe as possible and just make sure we won't lose the run here. But okay, we're finally getting to the very last level of the entire game, 8-4. To be honest, I don't even know what was going through my mind at this point. I'm pretty sure it was just completely focused because this was the run. I was not going to lose it here. In my 3 hours of playing, there's only one other time that I made it to 8-4. That one unfortunately died, and I would not let this one. So you'll see me going a little bit slower than I maybe needed to, and also accidentally pausing the game. Yeah, that was actually a problem throughout all of my runs. Sometimes the game would randomly pause, I think because of the compressed bag or something with the water. It was a little weird, but I mean, hey, that's the first time it happened this run, and at least it didn't kill me. But you can see how nervous I was just by this gameplay. I was terrified of losing this run. So terrified that when we made it to the 8-4 wrong warp, I decided to play it extremely safe and scroll the screen even more than I probably needed to. But hey, better safe than sorry, especially in a situation like this. Now we've made it into the water, and for here I had a very specific strategy. I mean, for this first blooper, you don't really have to worry about him. You can just go above him. But then after we make it through all the different fireballs in this first part of the room, I decided that I wanted to kill one of the bloopers just to make sure he wouldn't be able to mess me up later in the room. We're gonna kill the Hammer Bro that was right there and also wait out that fireball before pausing on accident. Then finally we damage boosted through Bowser and ended off our time with a sub 7-minute run, which is kind of insane. Subscribe if you enjoyed and want more.